The unexpected arrival. Dr. Nikolai Petrov stared at his computer screen, the soft blue glow illuminating his tired face. The quantum physics lab at MIT felt especially empty at 3 a.m., but that's when he did his best thinking. Or at least, that's what he told himself. In reality, he was lonely. 12 years of dedicated research had earned him recognition in the scientific community, but left little room for personal connections. The advertisement appeared in his feed like a cosmic joke. Find love beyond the stars' intergalactic marriage bureau. He should have dismissed it immediately. Instead, he found himself scrolling through profiles of beings from across the galaxy, each more fascinating than the last. That's when he saw her, Vexra, a quantum engineer from Lumeria, a planet known for its advanced crystalline technology. Her profile described her as a specialist in crystalline computing, with interests in theoretical physics and temporal mechanics. Her skin had a peculiar opalescent quality, shifting colors like the surface of a soap bubble. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, deep violet orbs that seemed to hold the mysteries of the universe. The application process was surprisingly rigorous. DNA compatibility tests, psychological evaluations, and even a background check that spanned multiple galaxies. When he finally received approval, the Bureau required payment in something called quantum credits. Fortunately, his research grants had left him with more than enough resources. 3 months later, Nikolai stood in his apartment, surrounded by preparation charts and cultural briefing documents. The delivery was scheduled for exactly midnight. He had cleared his schedule, studied Lumerian customs, and even attempted to learn basic phrases in their crystalline language, though the resonant tones were nearly impossible for human vocal cords to reproduce. The doorbell chimed at precisely 12:00 a.m. Outside stood a delivery drone, hovering silently with a container that defied description. It was a geometric shape that seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be possible, its surface constantly shifting and reorganizing itself like a living Penrose diagram. "Delivery for Dr. Nikolai Petrov," the drone announced in a melodious tone. "Please sign here and provide your quantum signature." Nikolai pressed his thumb against the scanner, watching as his DNA sequence was converted into a complex mathematical formula. The drone chirped in satisfaction and deposited the container in his living room before disappearing into the night. The container hummed with a frequency that made his teeth ache. As he approached, the surface began to respond to his presence, geometric patterns flowing like liquid mathematics. He found what appeared to be an activation panel and pressed his palm against it. The container unfolded like a flower blooming in reverse, each panel splitting into infinite fractals before reassembling into a platform. There stood Vexra, her form even more striking in person. Her skin rippled with colors that shouldn't exist in human vision, and her hair moved like fiber-optic cables catching light. "Greetings, Dr. Petrov," she spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that made his windows vibrate. "I trust my quantum signature arrived intact." Nikolai struggled to find his voice. "Yes, everything seems to be in order, and please call me Nikolai." Vexra stepped down from the platform, her movements liquid smooth. "Your dwelling is adequately shielded from temporal fluctuations, though the quantum stability could use improvement." She ran a finger along his bookshelf, leaving a trail of shimmering light. As she explored his apartment, Nikolai noticed something odd about the container. Instead of becoming inert after delivery, it continued to pulse with energy. Occasionally, what looked like equations would surface on its shifting exterior, only to disappear moments later. "The container," he ventured. "It seems unusually active for a transport device." Vex returned to him, her violet eyes flickering with what might have been concern. "The container serves many purposes, Nikolai. Transportation is merely its primary function." She paused, studying him with an intensity that made him feel like he was being scanned at the atomic level. "Tell me, in your research, have you encountered any unusual quantum anomalies lately?" The question caught him off guard. Just last week, his lab had recorded some bizarre readings, particles appearing to exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously. He'd attributed it to equipment malfunction. "How did you know about that?" Vexra's skin shifted to a deep blue. Perhaps we should discuss your work in detail. After all, isn't that why the Bureau matched us? Our mutual interest in quantum mechanics. As Nikolai prepared tea, a human custom he'd read that Lumerians found fascinating. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this arrangement than a simple marriage contract. The container continued its mysterious calculations in the corner, and Vexra's eyes kept darting toward it when she thought he wasn't looking. What exactly had he invited into his home? And why did he have the distinct impression that his lonely nights at the lab had led him into something far more complex than a simple marriage arrangement? Shattered expectations. The first few weeks with Vexra were nothing like Nikolai had imagined. While he'd expected some cultural adjustment, the reality was far more complex. His apartment had become an impromptu laboratory, with Vexra converting the spare bedroom into what she called a quantum harmonics chamber. The walls now rippled with crystalline growths that pulsed in sync with the original transport container. "These readings are concerning," Vexra muttered one morning, her fingers dancing through holographic displays that emerged from her skin. She hadn't slept since her arrival. Apparently, Lumerians required only brief periods of quantum synchronization instead of traditional rest. Nikolai watched her from the kitchen, coffee cup in hand. "What kind of readings?" "Your planet's quantum field is experiencing unprecedented fluctuations." She turned to him, her violet eyes fragmenting into multiple pupils for a moment. "Have you noticed any irregularities in your own experiments?" He had. Just yesterday, his team at MIT had been forced to shut down their quantum entanglement array when it started generating impossible results. Particles were appearing with properties that violated the known laws of physics. At first, he'd blamed equipment malfunction, but now. "Vexra," he said carefully, "does this have something to do with why you're really here?" The crystalline growths in the spare room suddenly pulsed bright red. Vexra's skin shifted to a deep purple, almost black. "You are more perceptive than the Bureau indicated," she said, her voice carrying new harmonics that made his coffee ripple. "But understanding the full truth could put you in danger." Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, his research partner, was calling. "Nikolai, you need to get to the lab immediately. Something's happening with the quantum array. It's active again, but we didn't turn it on." When they arrived at the lab, Nikolai immediately noticed the change. The normally sterile research space hummed with an energy he recognized, the same frequency as Vexra's crystals. The quantum array, supposedly powered down, was projecting a complex geometric pattern into the air. "This is impossible," Dr. Tanaka whispered, checking the equipment readings. "The array is receiving signals from—" "I can't even describe these coordinates. They don't match any known reference system." Vexra moved to the array with practiced familiarity. "The temporal barrier is thinning faster than expected," she murmured, more to herself than the humans. Her skin had taken on a translucent quality, and Nikolai could see what looked like stars moving beneath its surface. "What temporal barrier?" Nikolai demanded. "Vexra, I need to know what's going on. My research, my lab, my whole career could be at risk here." She turned to him, and for the first time he saw genuine emotion in her alien features, fear. "Your career is not what's at risk, Nikolai. Your entire reality is." She pressed her hand against the quantum array, and the geometric pattern shifted, revealing what looked like a window into another dimension. Through it, Nikolai could see a crystalline world where the laws of physics seemed more like suggestions. "I am not just a quantum engineer," Vexra continued. "I am a member of the Temporal Defense Corps. We detected a critical weakness in the quantum barrier between our universes, centered on this location. Your experiments, brilliant as they are, have been inadvertently weakening the fabric of spacetime." Dr. Tanaka stepped back, her face pale. "Are you saying we've been damaging reality itself?" "Not damaging," Vexra corrected. "Evolving it, but evolution can be dangerous if not properly controlled. The Bureau didn't arrange our marriage, Nikolai. My superiors did. They needed someone close to you, someone who could monitor and guide your research before it triggered a cascade failure in the quantum field." The transport container, which Vexra had insisted on bringing to the lab, suddenly burst open. Inside was not empty space, but a swirling vortex of mathematical equations made real. "This is a quantum dampener," she explained. "It's been absorbing the excess energy from your experiments, but it's reaching capacity. Soon, it won't be able to contain the buildup." Nikolai stared at the woman, the alien, he'd been sharing his home with. His bride wasn't just distant or culturally different. She was a temporal agent on a mission to save reality itself. And somehow, he'd become the center of a crisis that threatened multiple universes. "Why didn't you just tell me?" he asked, hurt mixing with scientific fascination in his voice. Vexra's skin rippled with patterns that looked almost like tears. "Because I didn't expect to feel anything for you. Emotional attachment compromises temporal agents, but watching you work, seeing your dedication to understanding the universe's mysteries." She paused, her form fluctuating between solid and ethereal. "I began to care, and now I fear that caring will make what comes next even more difficult." The quantum array suddenly flared with blinding light, and through the dimensional window, Nikolai saw massive crystalline structures approaching structures that looked disturbingly like weapons. The temperature in the lab dropped dramatically, and Dr. Tanaka's breath became visible in the air. "They're coming," Vexra whispered, her voice carrying harmonics of dread. "The Quantum Enforcement Division, they don't believe in subtle solutions to temporal threats." She turned to Nikolai, her violet eyes now blazing with determination. "We have hours at most before they arrive, and their solution will involve more than just shutting down your research." The implications hung in the air like frost. Nikolai looked at his life's work, at his confused colleague, and at the alien he'd begun to fall for despite everything. Whatever came next would change everything, assuming there was still a reality left to change. Quantum entanglement. The MIT lab had become a staging ground for what might be humanity's first interuniversal incident. Nikolai worked frantically at his computer, trying to make sense of the quantum readings, while Vexra's crystalline technology pulsed with increasing urgency. Dr. Tanaka had been sworn to secrecy and was now helping them modify the quantum array. "The Enforcement Division's approach is changing the local quantum field," Vexra announced, her skin flickering between colors like a malfunctioning display. "Their weapons will temporarily suspend the laws of physics in this region. Anything caught in the effect will be," she paused, searching for a human concept, "reset to a quantum ground state." "They're going to erase us from existence," Nikolai translated, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "But I think I understand what's happening. My research wasn't just weakening the barrier between universes, it was creating a bridge." The transport container in the corner suddenly projected a complex mathematical equation into the air. Vexra's eyes widened. "Of course, the container wasn't just dampening the energy, it was collecting data. Nikolai, your experiments weren't a threat, they were the next step in universal evolution." Dr. Tanaka looked up from her workstation. "The quantum fluctuations? They're not random. They're following a pattern like DNA replication but on a cosmic scale." Vexra moved to Nikolai's side, her presence causing his computer screen to ripple. "The Bureau's assessment was wrong. The Temporal Defense Corps has been so focused on maintaining the barriers between universes that we never considered they might need to change, to grow." A deep thrumming filled the lab, and through the dimensional window they could see massive crystalline ships approaching. The Enforcement Division was almost here. Nikolai felt Vexra's hand on his shoulder, her touch sending quantum data directly into his mind. "We can prove it to them," he said suddenly, understanding flooding his consciousness. "The container, it's not just a transport device or a dampener. It's a quantum computer capable of modeling universal evolution. Vexra, you didn't just bring a bride price. You brought the most advanced computational device in existence." "And you created the perfect test environment," she replied, her voice carrying notes of pride and fear simultaneously. "Your research facility, your brilliant mind pushing the boundaries. The Bureau didn't choose this location by accident. They knew what might happen, but the Enforcement Division. They're still operating on old protocols," Dr. Tanaka finished, catching on. "They see any change to universal constants as a threat." The lab's temperature continued to drop as the Enforcement Division ships drew closer. Ice crystals formed on the windows, taking the shape of complex equations. Nikolai could feel reality itself becoming unstable as two universal paradigms prepared to clash. Vexra's form suddenly solidified, her determination evident in every facet of her crystalline biology. We have one chance. The container can process the data from your experiments and prove that this evolution is natural, necessary even. But the energy requirements. The quantum array, Nikolai said, understanding immediately. We can channel all its power into the container, but that would mean sacrificing your life's work, Vexra finished softly. All your research, your data, your discoveries, everything would be consumed in the process. Dr. Tanaka was already moving to the controls. Better to lose the research than existence itself, but can we generate enough power? Nikolai looked at the quantum array, the achievement he'd spent his career building. Then he looked at Vexra, who had entered his life under false pretenses but was now fighting to save not just him, but the very nature of reality itself. The array alone won't be enough, he said slowly, but I think I know what will be. He walked to the building's main power junction. If we channel the entire city grid through the array. The feedback would be catastrophic, Dr. Tanaka warned. For the grid, yes, for us. Nikolai took a deep breath. Vexra, if we survive this, we need to have a serious discussion about honesty in marriage. A sound like crystal wind chimes filled the air. Vexra's laugh. If we survive this, I promise to share all my quantum secrets. The dimensional window suddenly flared, and through it they could see weapons being prepared on the crystalline ships. The enforcement division was done waiting. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath as Nikolai placed his hand on the power controls. I hope your superiors at the Bureau are ready for some evolution, he said, and threw the switch. The entire city of Cambridge went dark as every watt of power surged into the MIT lab. The quantum array blazed with impossible light, and the transport container began to unfold into shapes that hurt the human mind to witness. As the enforcement division's weapons powered up, Vexra pressed her hand against the container, her body becoming a living conduit for the quantum data that might save them all. Or tear reality apart in the attempt. Dimensional convergence. The MIT laboratory had become ground zero for what could only be described as reality's evolution. As the city's power grid fed into the quantum array, the air itself seemed to crystallize. Time moved strangely, with moments stretching into eternities and hours compressing into seconds. Vexra's body had become almost entirely translucent, her form a living prism channeling impossible amounts of energy through the transport container. The mathematical equations swirling around her told a story of universal change, of barriers that needed to break for growth to occur. The containment field is holding at 30%, Dr. Tanaka shouted over the roar of energy. But the enforcement division's ships are beginning to breach our local space. Through the dimensional window, massive crystalline vessels pushed through into their reality, their weapons charging with enough power to rewrite the quantum signature of everything they touched. The air crackled with ozone and possibility as two versions of universal law prepared to collide. Nikolai, Vexra's voice echoed with harmonics that made reality ripple. The data transfer is nearly complete, but the enforcement division won't wait. They're preparing to fire. Nikolai's hands flew over his keyboard, trying to stabilize the quantum array. His life's work was being consumed by the power surge, years of research transformed into fuel for this one desperate moment. But as he watched Vexra fighting to save not just him, but the very nature of existence, he realized something profound. It's not about controlling the evolution, he said suddenly, understanding flooding his mind. We're trying to control it, to channel it, but evolution doesn't work that way. It's about adaptation, about letting go of what we think should be. Vexra's eyes met his, all of them glowing with quantum fire. What are you suggesting? Instead of answering, Nikolai ran to the quantum array's main control panel. Dr. Tanaka, disengage all the safety protocols, all of them. That's insane, she protested. The feedback loop could tear apart the fabric of spacetime. No, Vexra whispered, understanding dawning in her crystalline features. It won't tear it apart, it will allow it to transform. The Bureau's original assessment wasn't wrong, it was incomplete. The barriers between universes aren't weakening, they're becoming permeable, evolving. The first shots from the enforcement division's ships hit their shields, shields created by the very energy they were trying to contain. Reality flickered like a faulty hologram, past and future bleeding into the present. Nikolai saw himself in multiple quantum states. The lonely scientist who had ordered an alien bride, the man who had fallen in love with a temporal agent, the researcher who had accidentally discovered the key to universal evolution. All of these versions were true, all of them real, all of them necessary. "Do it," he shouted to Dr. Tanaka. "Let it all go." With trembling hands, she disabled the final safety protocols. The quantum array's controlled flow of energy became a torrent, a tsunami of possibility crashing through the barriers of what they had thought possible. The transport container, that seemingly simple delivery device, revealed its true nature. It wasn't just a quantum computer. It was a seed, a crystalline embryo of universal change. As the last protocols fell away, it began to grow, its structure expanding to fill the lab with geometries that existed in more dimensions than the human mind could comprehend. Vexra's body seemed to merge with the growing crystalline structure, her form becoming both more and less solid. "The enforcement division," she called out, her voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "They're receiving the data. They can see the truth." Through the dimensional window, they watched as the massive ships halted their attack. The weapons powered down as the universal constants themselves seemed to flex and shift, not breaking but adapting, growing into something new. "The quantum barrier," Dr. Tanaka said in awe, checking readings that shouldn't have been possible. "It's not just our universe. All of them, they're all changing together." Nikolai reached out toward Vexra's shifting form, his hand passing through layers of reality to find hers. In that touch, he felt the truth of what they had discovered. Reality wasn't a fixed set of laws to be preserved, but a living thing capable of growth and change. The crystalline structure continued to expand, turning the lab into a nexus point between universes. Through its faceted surfaces, they could see countless realities, all undergoing the same transformation. The enforcement division ships began to retreat, their mission parameters fundamentally altered by what they were witnessing. "It's beautiful," Vexra's voice resonated through the crystal lattice, her form slowly beginning to solidify. "We're all connected, all growing together. This is what the Bureau suspected but couldn't prove until your research showed the way." But as the power surge began to fade, and reality started to stabilize into its new configuration, Nikolai realized they weren't done yet. The easy part, saving existence, was over. Now came the real challenge, figuring out what it meant to be married to a temporal agent in a universe where the laws of physics had just evolved. And somewhere in the crystalline structure, in frequencies only Lumerians could hear, the sound of universal laughter echoed through the dimensions. Beyond the constants, 1 month after what the scientific community had dubbed the quantum evolution event, the MIT laboratory had become something entirely new. The crystalline structure remained, now serving as an interdimensional research center where scientists from multiple universes collaborated. Dr. Tanaka had been appointed as Earth's first liaison to the Interuniversal Science Council, a position she accepted with characteristic calm and a barely hidden smile. Nikolai sat in what used to be his office, now transformed into a space that existed partially in several dimensions at once. The walls shifted between states of matter, and equations wrote themselves in the air. But his attention wasn't on the miraculous technology surrounding him. It was on the marriage certificate hovering holographically above his desk. "Having second thoughts?" Vexra's voice carried its familiar crystalline harmonics as she materialized in the room. Her form had stabilized since the event, though she could still shift between solid and energy states at will. Today, she wore a blend of human business attire and Lumerian quantum crystals, a fashion trend that was catching on among the growing interspecies diplomatic corps. "Not second thoughts," Nikolai replied, smiling at his wife. now his actual, legally recognized wife in both human and Lumerian law. Just appreciating how strange life can be, I ordered an alien bride and ended up helping revolutionize the fundamental nature of reality. Vexra moved to his side, her presence causing nearby quantum displays to flicker in response. The Bureau sends their apologies again for the deception. Though they point out that their matching algorithm was ultimately correct, we were perfect for each other, just not for the reasons initially stated. The marriage certificate shimmered, displaying its dual nature, one moment a traditional Earth document, the next a complex Lumerian quantum contract. Like everything else since the event, it existed in multiple states simultaneously, a testament to how much the universe had changed, and was still changing. The latest data from the Enforcement Division is promising, Vexra continued, pulling up a holographic display. The quantum barriers between universes have stabilized in their new configuration. Evolution is proceeding exactly as your research predicted, controlled, but not constrained. Nikolai stood, walking to the window that overlooked the Cambridge campus. Students from a dozen different species now walked the paths between buildings, their forms ranging from purely physical to partly ethereal. The sky above held a subtle crystalline sheen, a permanent reminder of how reality had transformed. "And the temporal fluctuations?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. He could feel them now, a gift or side effect of his close exposure during the event. "Normalized," Vexra confirmed. Though normal has a rather different definition these days, the Temporal Defense Corps has been completely restructured. We're no longer defenders of rigid universal laws, but guides for cosmic evolution. She paused, her skin shifting through colors that expressed emotions humans were only beginning to understand. "Which reminds me, they've offered you a position." Nikolai turned to her, eyebrows raised. "They want me to join the Corps. I thought non-Lumerians couldn't." "A lot of things we thought impossible are now everyday reality," she interrupted, her expression both serious and amused. "The Corps needs people who can think beyond established constants, who can see potential where others see only chaos." Her form flickered momentarily with remembered energy. People who would risk everything to prove that change isn't always a threat. The quantum arrays that now powered the lab hummed in harmony with her words. In the month since the event, Nikolai had learned to read these subtle vibrations, the universe itself expressing approval or concern for the choices being made within it. "Besides," Vexra added, her voice taking on the musical quality that he now recognized as teasing, "having a temporal agent for a wife does come with certain career expectations." Nikolai laughed, the sound causing nearby crystal formations to resonate in response. "I suppose it would look bad if I turned down the job offer, though I have one condition." "Oh," Vexra's eyes shifted through various geometric configurations, her version of raising an eyebrow. "Next time you're assigned to make first contact with a potentially reality-changing physicist," he said, pulling her close, "maybe lead with the truth." The crystalline walls around them chimed with Vexra's laughter. "Where's the romance in that?" Outside their office, the transformed MIT campus bustled with activity. Human scientists worked alongside beings of pure energy. Students from gas giant worlds floated through halls designed to accommodate multiple forms of existence. And in every lab, the boundaries of possibility were pushed further each day. The quantum array that had started it all still stood in the main lab, now serving as a monument to the moment when two people from different universes proved that love, like reality itself, could evolve beyond anyone's expectations. The transport container that had brought them together had become a seed crystal for a garden of new possibilities, its equations still dancing through the air like poetry written in the language of physics. And in their office, a human quantum physicist and a Lumerian temporal agent held each other close, their personal quantum states perfectly entangled, as around them the universe continued its endless dance of evolution and change. Their marriage certificate pulsed with light, recording not just their union, but the moment when love had helped reshape reality itself. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of romance after all,